The Miami sun was ruthless that Friday afternoon, reflecting off the glass doors of Summit Financial Bank like a mirror. A woman in her mid-30s stepped out of a black rental sedan, wearing faded jeans, a simple navy hoodie, and sneakers that had seen better days. Her hair was tied up in a casual bun, and there wasn't a trace of makeup on her face. Her name was Vanessa Brooks, though no one here knew that she was the chief executive officer of Summit Financial Group, one of the largest privately owned banking networks in the country. She took a slow breath before entering the branch. "No assistant, no press, no limo. Just me," she whispered, tightening her grip on a leather wallet. The branch lobby buzzed with the faint hum of printers and the artificial warmth of customer service smiles. Behind the counters, employees typed away, nodding mechanically at well-dressed clients. Vanessa took a number and waited her turn, unnoticed by anyone except the security guard, who gave her a suspicious glance. When her number flashed on the screen, she approached the VIP counter, a glass-walled office labeled Private Client Services, Lisa Newman, branch manager. Lisa looked up from her computer and blinked twice, scanning Vanessa from head to toe. Ma'am?" she began slowly. "This area is reserved for our private banking clients. Regular services are handled up front." Vanessa smiled politely. "I understand. I'm here to withdraw funds from my Summit executive account, $3 million. Lisa's polite expression hardened, as if someone had just made an inappropriate joke. "3? "Yes," Vanessa said calmly, pulling out her identification and account card. "I'll need it in a certified transfer to a holding company. I can wait." Lisa let out a small, incredulous laugh. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but that's not something we process here. Maybe you should check with your local branch." Vanessa tilted her head. "This is my branch." Across the lobby, a few customers turned to look. The room felt heavier now, not from noise, but from quiet disbelief. The guard shifted his stance. Lisa stood up from her chair. "To be frank, Miss Brooks, was it? We have to verify such requests carefully. And with all due respect, we can't just hand out millions of dollars to, well, to what?" She hesitated. "To anyone without proper verification, you understand." The CEO nodded slowly, her eyes calm but sharp. "Oh, I understand perfectly." She gathered her papers, then looked Lisa directly in the eyes. "Consider this your verification process." Lisa frowned, confused, as Vanessa quietly pressed a small button on her watch, a discreet feature connected to her assistant's phone. Somewhere in another part of the city, a notification pinged, Protocol 6, activated. Vanessa smiled faintly. "Let's see how your team handles integrity under pressure." She leaned back in her chair, as if settling in for a show she already knew the ending to. Lisa Newman took a deep breath and adjusted her blazer, clearly trying to maintain control of the situation. "Miss Brooks," she said, forcing a smile, "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. You said you wanted to withdraw $3 million? I just need to confirm, what kind of account did you say you had again?" Vanessa didn't flinch. "Summit Executive Tier," she replied evenly, sliding her bank card forward. "You'll find it's active. I've been with Summit since its founding." Lisa blinked, skeptical. "Since its founding? Ma'am, Summit Financial has been around for 20 years? 21, Vanessa corrected gently. Lisa's smile tightened. "Right. Well, I'll have Edward run a quick check." She gestured to the teller behind her, a tall man in his 40s with slicked-back hair and a badge that read Edward Pierce. He approached with the cautious politeness of someone who thought he was dealing with a scammer. Edward leaned down to whisper, but Vanessa heard every word. "Lisa, her card's legit, but the balance can't be right. It says 8 digits." Lisa's face froze.
8 digits? That has to be a glitch. Run it again. I did. Same result. Lisa glanced back at Vanessa, her professional tone starting to slip. Ma'am, may I ask where these funds came from? Vanessa smiled softly. From my company's retained earnings. Lisa crossed her arms. Which company would that be? Summit Financial Group. Edward chuckled under his breath. Wait, our company? Vanessa nodded. Yes, you could say that. That was when Lisa's patience snapped. All right, Miss Brooks, this is getting ridiculous. If you're claiming to own Summit Financial, I'm going to have to ask you to step outside while we contact headquarters. Vanessa's voice was calm, almost too calm. And what would you like to tell them? That we have someone here impersonating corporate leadership. You think you can just walk in here dressed like... She caught herself before saying it, but the damage was done. The word, you people, lingered unspoken in the air. Vanessa leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Like what, Lisa? The manager's cheeks flushed pink. Like someone who isn't a verified client. That's all I meant. But Vanessa didn't answer. She just folded her hands and said quietly, Go ahead, call them. Lisa hesitated, then motioned to Edward. Edward, please call security. Within seconds, the guard approached, a tall man named Tyler, who looked more nervous than anyone else in the room. Ma'am, I'm gonna have to ask you to wait in the lobby. Vanessa stood up slowly. You're asking me to leave a bank that I helped build? Build? Really? Look, lady, if you can't verify your account, that's on you. This isn't some kind of social experiment. Vanessa looked at him, a long, steady look that made Edward shift uncomfortably. No, she said softly, but it might become one. A woman sitting nearby, a customer named Maya, leaned over and whispered just loud enough for others to hear. She's not being rude. Why are y'all treating her like that? Lisa turned sharply. Ma'am, please stay out of this. But the damage was already spreading. Whispers rippled through the lobby, half disbelief, half curiosity. A man named Keith started recording on his phone. Vanessa noticed him and raised her hand. Don't record, she said quietly. Use your voice instead. Cameras fade, words stay. The guard hesitated. Lisa was tense. Edward crossed his arms. And Vanessa, perfectly calm, returned to her chair. Inside her, the CEO part of her, the one that had built empires, negotiated mergers, and stood before shareholders, was wide awake now. She wasn't angry yet, but she was taking notes.
The air in the lobby thickened like humidity before a storm. Vanessa sat calmly while whispers grew louder around her. Lisa tried to maintain authority, but her voice trembled slightly now. The situation had already drifted beyond her control. Edward muttered something under his breath and disappeared behind a counter. Moments later, he returned with a tablet. See, he said to Lisa, her ID looks off. The signature's digital. Could be fake. Lisa nodded firmly, grateful for anything to justify her stance. Exactly. Ms. Brooks, I'm sorry, but until we verify your credentials, you can't remain in this area. Vanessa exhaled slowly, almost amused. You haven't verified anything because you never looked, she said, her tone razor-sharp but controlled. You're not following protocol, Lisa. You're following prejudice. The words landed heavy. Edward rolled his eyes. Oh, please, don't make this about race. Vanessa's gaze didn't waver. Then make it about respect. That single line turned heads. People in the lobby began murmuring, some recording discreetly despite her earlier request. Lisa gestured sharply toward the door. Tyler, escort her out, now. Tyler, the guard, stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable. Ma'am, maybe we should just wait for HQ to call back? Lisa snapped. Do it, Tyler. Before he could move, a middle-aged man in a suit, another customer, stood up. Excuse me, he said firmly. I've been banking here for 15 years, and I've never seen you treat anyone like this. She's being respectful. You're out of line. Lisa's expression faltered. Sir, please, this doesn't concern you. It does. You just accused a woman of fraud because she doesn't look like what you expect a millionaire to look like. Maya, the younger woman from earlier, nodded. Exactly. You wouldn't talk to her like that if she walked in here wearing a Chanel suit. The tension hit its breaking point. Lisa turned red. This is not about appearance, it's about procedure. Vanessa stood now, slowly, deliberately, and her voice cut through the noise like glass. Then follow it. Verify my account. Verify my name. And when you do, remember this moment, because the way you treat me now will define you later. Lisa froze, unsure what to do next. The words felt too measured, too confident. It wasn't the tone of someone bluffing. Edward tried to diffuse it. Look, just give us your employer's contact and we'll confirm everything. Vanessa smiled faintly. You already have it. Edward frowned. No, we don't. Yes, you do. She replied. You work for me. Before anyone could process that, her smartwatch vibrated softly. She glanced down and saw text from her assistant. Protocol 6 in progress. Documentation underway. She didn't respond. Instead, she looked up and said quietly, I'm not here to argue. I'm here to observe. Observe what? Lisa snapped. She met her eyes. How easily power becomes arrogance and how fast it falls apart when truth walks in. The room fell silent for a moment, the kind of silence that feels like the eye of a hurricane. Then Lisa broke it, calling across the counter to Edward. Call the police, now! Edward hesitated, looking between them. Lisa, maybe that's not necessary. Do it, she barked. I won't be held responsible if this turns into a security threat. Tyler's hand twitched near his radio. Customers began murmuring nervously. Maya whispered, She's really doing it. She's calling the cops on her own boss and doesn't even know it. Vanessa closed her eyes, whispering under her breath, 10 minutes. Just 10 more minutes. When she opened them again, she wasn't just the woman in jeans anymore. She was the CEO watching her own company fail its moral audit in real time. The rhythmic tap of Lisa's acrylic nails on the phone echoed across the marble floor as she called 911. Her voice was composed, yet trembling with self-righteous energy. Hi, yes, this is Lisa Newman, branch manager at Summit Financial Miami. We have a suspicious individual here attempting to withdraw several $1 million under a false identity. She's refusing to leave the premises. A few customers gasped. The whispering turned into low chatter. Maya muttered under her breath, Suspicious? She's been calm the whole time. Keith, still recording discreetly despite Vanessa's earlier request, shook his head. Man, this is gonna blow up online. Vanessa sat silently, hands folded, watching it unfold like a play she'd seen before. She had witnessed this kind of moment 100 times in reports, people with power mistaking prejudice for procedure. But this time, she wasn't reading about it, she was living it. Lisa hung up and crossed her arms, victorious. The police will be here shortly. We'll sort this out once they arrive. Edward leaned against the counter, smirking. Good. Maybe then she'll stop wasting everyone's time. Vanessa turned to him, voice quiet but steady. Every second of your time says more about you than about me. Lisa scowled. Save the lectures. You've caused enough chaos for one afternoon. Vanessa's smartwatch buzzed again. A new message appeared on its sleek black screen. Carla, police dispatch confirmed. Stay calm. Cameras rolling. She didn't flinch. She didn't even glance around. Her gaze remained locked on Lisa's. You think you're in control. You're not. You're just being watched by the very system you claim to represent. Lisa frowned. Excuse me? Before Vanessa could respond, the glass doors swung open. 2 uniformed police officers entered, their presence immediately altering the atmosphere. Conversation stopped. Eyes turned. Afternoon, ma'am, one officer said to Lisa. You reported a suspected fraud attempt? Lisa nodded quickly. Yes, that's her. She's claiming to be a summit executive and demanding a multi-million-dollar withdrawal. She's refusing to leave the premises. The taller officer turned toward Vanessa. Ma'am, may we see your ID, please? Vanessa nodded calmly, retrieving it from her wallet. Of course. The second officer took it, studying the card and the name. Vanessa Brooks, he read aloud. This ID looks legit. Lisa interrupted. It's fake. Look at her. She doesn't even have an assistant. No briefcase, no appointment. The officer gave her a measured look. That's not how we determine authenticity, ma'am. Vanessa spoke up, her tone composed but firm. Officer, I appreciate your professionalism. You can call Summit Financial Headquarters in New York. Ask for Carla Jennings, Executive Operations Director. She'll verify my identity. Lisa rolled her eyes. Right, and next you'll tell us you own the whole company. Vanessa turned her head slowly, eyes meeting Lisa's. No, not the whole company, just 81%. The words hit like a silent explosion. The officers exchanged glances. One of them muttered, Wait, did she say 81%? Lisa's jaw tightened. She's bluffing. The taller officer keyed his radio. Dispatch, can you confirm contact for a Carla Jennings, Summit Financial Headquarters, New York? Static. Then, one moment, officer. The tension in the room grew unbearable. Even the printers seemed to stop humming. Lisa whispered to Edward, If this is some kind of prank, we're screwed. The radio crackled again. This is Carla Jennings, Executive Operations Director. Officer, who am I speaking with? This is Officer Hernandez, Miami PD. We're with Ms. Vanessa Brooks at your Miami branch. She is requesting identity verification. There was a pause. Then Carla's voice, clear and sharp. Verify her immediately. That's our CEO. The room fell into absolute silence. Lisa blinked. What? You heard me? Carla continued through the radio. That woman owns the majority of this bank. I suggest you treat her accordingly. The officer turned to Vanessa, eyes wide. Ma'am, I apologize. I had no idea. Vanessa smiled faintly. Most people don't, until they have to. She stood, smooth and deliberate, every eye in the lobby following her. Lisa stumbled backward, her face pale. She leaned forward slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. 10 minutes ago, you called me a fraud. Now you know the truth. The real question, Lisa, is whether you'll admit why you never believed me in the first place. Lisa's lips trembled. She said nothing. The officer stepped aside. Vanessa turned toward them and nodded politely. Thank you, officers. You handled this with more dignity than my own employees did. As they exited the branch, Carla's voice came through the radio one last time. Ms. Brooks, do you want me to proceed with internal review protocols? Vanessa looked around at the staff, frozen like statues. Yes, she said softly, as of now. And then, to Lisa, she added, Don't worry, you won't have to call the police again. Next time, they'll be calling you.
For a full minute, no one moved. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound in the room as Lisa stood frozen, still clutching her phone. Edward's smirk had vanished completely. The customers looked between Vanessa and the staff, piecing together what had just happened. Vanessa took a slow step forward, her sneakers silent against the polished floor. The confidence radiating from her wasn't loud. It was measured, heavy, the kind that made people straighten instinctively when she looked at them. She approached the main counter, where Edward stood pale and sweating. "Edward," she said gently, "how long have you worked here?" He stammered, 6 years, ma'am. Miss. 6 years, she repeated. "Then you should know Summit's verification policy for large withdrawals, correct?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "And does that policy involve calling the police before even confirming identity?" Edward looked down. "No, ma'am." "Good, because that's exactly what we'll review in our next compliance meeting, assuming you're still part of it." Lisa found her voice again. "Look, Miss Brooks, Vanessa, this was just a misunderstanding. You have to see it from our side. You came in without security, no appointment, no entourage. You have to admit it looked unusual." Vanessa turned, her tone calm but unyielding. "Unusual doesn't justify unjust. You didn't question my paperwork, you questioned me." Lisa tried to recover. "It wasn't personal." Vanessa's gaze sharpened. "When a woman of color walks into her own bank and is treated like a criminal, it's personal." A low murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Maya, still near the back, said softly, "Tell her." Vanessa placed her hands on the counter and leaned forward slightly. "When I started Summit, I had to prove myself in rooms full of people who didn't believe I belonged there. I didn't think I'd still be fighting that battle inside my own walls." Lisa looked down, eyes darting anywhere but at Vanessa. At that moment, the branch's assistant manager, Robert, finally emerged from his office. He had been silent the whole time, watching from behind the glass. "Miss Brooks," he said nervously, I didn't know it was you." Vanessa turned toward him. "That's the point, Robert. You shouldn't have needed to." He swallowed hard. I tried to tell them to verify your ID first. They didn't listen." Vanessa nodded slowly. "And you didn't insist. That's what silence looks like in a system built on bias." Robert's head dropped. "You're right." She turned back to Lisa. "Do you know what Protocol 6 is, Lisa?" Lisa blinked, confused. "No. It's our internal observation directive. When employees are suspected of violating Summit's ethics code, racism, harassment, discrimination, we activate live documentation. Every word you've said since I walked through that door has been recorded." Lisa's mouth fell open. "Recorded?" "Yes," Vanessa said. "Audio, time-stamped, backed up to corporate. And before you ask, yes, it's admissible in HR review." A pen could have dropped in that room and been heard. Edward stepped back, muttering, "Oh my God!" Vanessa walked toward the center of the lobby, her voice carrying effortlessly now. "Everyone here needs to understand something. I don't fire people for mistakes. I fire people for values." She looked at Lisa. "And yours don't belong here." Lisa's lip quivered. "You can't just—" "I can," Vanessa interrupted, "because I own this branch, and because leadership isn't about protecting comfort, it's about protecting people from exactly what just happened here." A few customers began to clap quietly, almost hesitantly, then louder. Within seconds, the entire lobby was applauding, not out of spectacle, but relief. Vanessa held up her hand to calm them. "This isn't about punishment," she said. "It's about accountability. And starting today, this bank will no longer look the other way when dignity is on the line." Lisa stared at her, eyes glassy. "I made one mistake." "No," Vanessa said softly. "You made a choice." Then she turned toward the officers, who were standing near the door, still wide-eyed from the revelation. "Thank you, officers. I'll take it from here." As they left, Vanessa walked behind Lisa's desk and picked up the framed company mission statement on the wall. She read it aloud. Summit Financial, building trust through fairness and integrity. She set it down gently. We failed that mission today, but that changes now. The applause swelled again. Maya smiled. Keith lowered his phone, whispering, "Man, that's power right there." Vanessa looked out over the crowd, her employees, her customers, her institution, and said quietly, "Truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stand." And she stood silently as the branch realized that nothing about their world would ever be the same again.
By Monday morning, the Miami branch of Summit Financial felt more like a courtroom than a bank. The blinds were drawn. Employees sat in rigid silence, waiting for Vanessa Brooks to arrive. Rumors had already spread across the company. The CEO personally shut down a branch. Vanessa stepped inside with her assistant Carla and 2 compliance officers in navy suits. She was composed, wearing a charcoal gray pantsuit this time. No disguise, no pretense, only purpose. She walked to the center of the lobby and faced her staff. "Good morning," she began softly, but her voice carried like the echo of a gavel. "We have a lot to discuss." Lisa, standing near the counter, looked pale and defiant at the same time. "Miss Brooks, before you say anything, I've had an exemplary record here. One mistake shouldn't define my career." Vanessa nodded slowly. "You're right, but this wasn't one mistake. It was a reflection of your character under pressure." Lisa's jaw clenched. "I thought I was protecting the bank." "No," Vanessa said calmly. "You were protecting your bias." The room fell silent. Carla began passing around printed reports, transcriptions from the Protocol 6 recordings. Every word, every comment, every tone from that Friday afternoon laid bare on paper. Edward glanced at the transcript in his hands and muttered, "I didn't mean half the things I said." Vanessa looked directly at him. "Then why did you say them?" He had no answer. Robert, the assistant manager, stepped forward. "Miss Brooks, I froze. I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't stop it. I just didn't want to lose my job." Vanessa softened, but her tone stayed steady. "Fear doesn't excuse silence, Robert. It just delays justice." Lisa interjected, voice trembling now. "Are you going to fire all of us?" Vanessa tilted her head. "You fired yourselves the moment you chose disrespect over procedure. I'm just signing the paperwork." Carla handed her a folder. Vanessa opened it and began reading aloud. "Effective immediately. Lisa Newman, terminated for violation of Summit Ethics Code 4.2, discriminatory conduct and abuse of authority. Edward Pierce, terminated for corroboration and hostile conduct toward clientele. Tyler Mills, security officer, suspended pending investigation for enabling wrongful detainment." Lisa's breathing quickened. "You're ending my career over one afternoon?" Vanessa stepped closer. "You ended your career the moment you decided who I was based on how I looked." Lisa's lips trembled. "I didn't mean to." "You did," Vanessa interrupted gently. "And the worst part is you didn't even notice. That's the problem I'm here to fix." She turned toward Natalie, the administrative officer who had remained quiet through most of the meeting. "Natalie, you've been here 7 years, correct?" Natalie nodded nervously. Vanessa's expression softened. "You filed 3 internal complaints about racial bias that were never addressed, didn't you?" Natalie blinked in surprise. "Yes, ma'am. How did you know?" Carla answered, "We found them buried under HR archives labeled resolved. None of them were investigated." Vanessa looked at Lisa. "And you were the one who signed them off." Lisa's face went white. "That's not true." Natalie opened her printed packet, pointing to the signature. "It's your handwriting, Lisa." Lisa's shoulders sagged.
I was told to close cases that might hurt branch metrics. Everyone does it. Vanessa's voice hardened. Not under my leadership. Not anymore. There was a pause. Then Tyler, the guard, spoke quietly from the back. Miss Brooks, I followed orders, but I knew it was wrong to approach you that way. I was told to monitor high-risk customers who didn't match our VIP profiles. Vanessa turned toward him slowly. Who told you that? He hesitated. It came from regional management, not just here. Carla scribbled a note. Vanessa nodded grimly. Thank you for your honesty. You'll stay suspended pending review, but your cooperation will help us fix what's broken. She exhaled and turned back to the group. You see, this isn't just about one branch. It's about a culture that rewards comfort and punishes courage. Her eyes swept across the silent employees. If we don't hold ourselves accountable, the system we built becomes our own prison. Summit Financial was supposed to represent opportunity, not oppression. No one spoke. Finally, Vanessa closed the folder and said quietly, Lisa, Edward, you're dismissed. HR will escort you out. Lisa's eyes welled up. Vanessa, please, I can learn. I can do better. Vanessa's expression didn't change. Then do better somewhere else. Lisa lowered her head as security entered the room. The moment the doors closed behind her, the tension seemed to lift, replaced with something else, a heavy, sober clarity. Vanessa turned to the remaining staff. This isn't the end, she said. It's the beginning of accountability. Robert nodded slowly. What happens now? Vanessa's tone softened. Now we rebuild, not with policies, with people. And as she walked toward the exit, her voice echoed behind her. Justice isn't revenge, it's restoration.
By Monday morning, the Miami branch of Summit Financial felt more like a courtroom than a bank. The blinds were drawn. Employees sat in rigid silence, waiting for Vanessa Brooks to arrive. Rumors had already spread across the company. The CEO personally shut down a branch. Vanessa stepped inside with her assistant Carla and 2 compliance officers in navy suits. She was composed, wearing a charcoal gray pantsuit this time. No disguise, no pretense, only purpose. She walked to the center of the lobby and faced her staff. Good morning, she began softly, but her voice carried like the echo of a gavel. We have a lot to discuss. Lisa, standing near the counter, looked pale and defiant at the same time. Miss Brooks, before you say anything, I've had an exemplary record here. One mistake shouldn't define my career. Vanessa nodded slowly. You're right, but this wasn't one mistake. It was a reflection of your character under pressure. Lisa's jaw clenched. I thought I was protecting the bank. No, Vanessa said calmly. You were protecting your bias. The room fell silent. Carla began passing around printed reports, transcriptions from the Protocol 6 recordings. Every word, every comment, every tone from that Friday afternoon laid bare on paper. Edward glanced at the transcript in his hands and muttered, I didn't mean half the things I said. Vanessa looked directly at him. Then why did you say them? He had no answer. Robert, the assistant manager, stepped forward. Miss Brooks, I froze. I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't stop it. I just didn't want to lose my job. Vanessa softened, but her tone stayed steady. Fear doesn't excuse silence, Robert. It just delays justice. Lisa interjected, voice trembling now. Are you going to fire all of us? Vanessa tilted her head. You fired yourselves the moment you chose disrespect over procedure. I'm just signing the paperwork. Carla handed her a folder. Vanessa opened it and began reading aloud. Effective immediately. Lisa Newman, terminated for violation of Summit Ethics Code 4.2, discriminatory conduct and abuse of authority. Edward Pierce,
terminated for corroboration and hostile conduct toward clientele. Tyler Mills, security officer, suspended pending investigation for enabling wrongful detainment. Lisa's breathing quickened. You're ending my career over one afternoon? Vanessa stepped closer. You ended your career the moment you decided who I was based on how I looked. Lisa's lips trembled. I didn't mean to. You did, Vanessa interrupted gently. And the worst part is you didn't even notice. That's the problem I'm here to fix. She turned toward Natalie, the administrative officer who had remained quiet through most of the meeting. Natalie, you've been here 7 years, correct? Natalie nodded nervously. Vanessa's expression softened. You filed 3 internal complaints about racial bias that were never addressed, didn't you? Natalie blinked in surprise. Yes, ma'am. How did you know? Carla answered. We found them buried under HR archives labeled Resolved. None of them were investigated. Vanessa looked at Lisa. And you were the one who signed them off. Lisa's face went white. That's not true. Natalie opened her printed packet, pointing to the signature. It's your handwriting, Lisa. Lisa's shoulders sagged. I was told to close cases that might hurt branch metrics. Everyone does it. Vanessa's voice hardened. Not under my leadership. Not anymore. There was a pause. Then Tyler, the guard, spoke quietly from the back. Miss Brooks, I followed orders, but I knew it was wrong to approach you that way. I was told to monitor high-risk customers who didn't match our VIP profiles. Vanessa turned toward him slowly. Who told you that? He hesitated. It came from regional management, not just here. Carla scribbled a note. Vanessa nodded grimly. Thank you for your honesty. You'll stay suspended pending review, but your cooperation will help us fix what's broken. She exhaled and turned back to the group. You see, this isn't just about one branch. It's about a culture that rewards comfort and punishes courage. Her eyes swept across the silent employees. If we don't hold ourselves accountable, the system we built becomes our own prison. Summit Financial was supposed to represent opportunity, not oppression. No one spoke. Finally, Vanessa closed the folder and said quietly, Lisa, Edward, you're dismissed. HR will escort you out. Lisa's eyes welled up. Vanessa, please, I can learn. I can do better. Vanessa's expression didn't change. Then do better somewhere else. Lisa lowered her head as security entered the room. The moment the doors closed behind her, the tension seemed to lift, replaced with something else, a heavy, sober clarity. Vanessa turned to the remaining staff. This isn't the end, she said. It's the beginning of accountability. Robert nodded slowly. What happens now? Vanessa's tone softened. Now we rebuild, not with policies, with people. And as she walked toward the exit, her voice echoed behind her. Justice isn't revenge, it's restoration.
Months passed. The Miami branch, once the epicenter of scandal, was now quiet, freshly renovated, and filled with new faces. The Summit logo gleamed in the morning light, but what shone brightest wasn't the glass, it was the tone inside. Employees greeted every customer with sincerity. Conversations were warmer, slower, more human. The new branch manager, a soft-spoken woman named Amira Lewis, had been hand-picked by Vanessa Brooks herself, not for her resume, but for her empathy. Every Friday, Amira held a voice circle where customers and staff could speak openly about their experiences. No scripts, no hierarchy, just listening. One morning, a familiar sound of heels clicked across the polished marble floor. Conversations paused for a heartbeat before resuming naturally. Vanessa Brooks walked in, no longer undercover, but still in jeans and a simple blazer. She wasn't here as the CEO. She was here as a customer. Amira smiled. "Miss Brooks," she greeted warmly. "No appointments today?" Vanessa grinned. "Just wanted to see how things are running without me breathing down everyone's neck." Amira laughed. "Smooth as ever. But you started something. People actually want to come to the meetings now." Vanessa nodded, looking around. The space felt alive again, filled with quiet dignity. A young teller was explaining an account option to an elderly immigrant woman using gentle words and patience. Across the room, 2 employees helped a homeless veteran set up a checking account through the new Equity Access program, another initiative Vanessa launched after the incident. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was progress. As Vanessa stepped outside, she spotted a local news crew setting up nearby. A reporter approached her cautiously. "Miss Brooks, do you mind a few questions about Summit's transformation? People are calling it the Fairness Revolution." Vanessa chuckled. "That's a big title for something that should have been normal all along." The reporter smiled. "Still, your story has inspired other corporations to adopt similar audits. How does that feel?" Vanessa thought for a moment. "It feels hopeful. But hope doesn't mean we're done. It means we're willing to keep trying." The reporter nodded. "What's your biggest takeaway from everything that happened?" Vanessa looked at the skyline, Miami's sunlight reflecting off every window, blinding and beautiful. "That power isn't about owning the building," she said softly. "It's about making sure everyone who walks through its doors feels they belong there." She paused, her eyes thoughtful. "We're all gatekeepers of something. Fairness, compassion, truth. The question is whether we open those gates or close them." The reporter lowered her mic, visibly moved. "Thank you, Miss Brooks." Vanessa smiled gently. "Thank you, but don't thank me. Thank the people who decided to speak up when silence was easier." She turned, walking toward her car. The same car from months ago, unassuming, silver, quiet. As she drove away, the camera caught her reflection in the rearview mirror, calm, steady, content. Inside the branch, the new team was already starting their morning meeting. On the wall behind them, framed in silver, hung a plaque that read, "Fairness begins where assumptions end. Vanessa Brooks." The camera zoomed out, the city humming, lives intersecting, voices blending, until the world felt bigger, kinder, and a little more awake. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive through headlines or viral clips. Sometimes it walks quietly, teaches patiently, and leaves behind a system better than the one it found. And for Vanessa Brooks, that was legacy enough.